end of the presentation. So over to you, Dr. Krishna.
Thank you, Asha, and thanks to SMCRF for inviting me and for the presentation that I'll be giving. It's an honor to be here to speak about the Indian Eastern Himalayas. So I'm just sharing my screen.
I request all the participants to please mute their microphones because we have started the program, and we'll take the questions from the chat box at the end of the presentation.
I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, Dr. Murali. Yes.
Okay. Just a second. Okay, so good evening, everyone. So I'll be speaking about Indian Eastern Himalayas, a paradise to biodiversity, and Nepal is also a part of the Eastern Himalayas through in some of the nomenclatures that we tend to classify the Himalayas. So today we'll be just speaking in broad about the diversity that you tend to see in the Indian Eastern Himalayan region. Because if I start speaking about the extensive diversity starting from the invertebrates to vertebrates, it would take like one complete day to speak about the diversity of Indian Eastern Himalayas, just to keep on speaking about the diversity. So I'll just throw certain light in my talk where I'll be looking at certain importance when it comes to the being a hotspot area. I'll be throwing some light mostly on the small mammals as well as the small carnivores, because I have been giving this talk to FMCRF, which usually focuses on the small mammals, and I'll be presenting about certain case studies related to the small mammal diversity, especially of gliding squirrels, because I have been researching on gliding squirrels since like past 10 years. So sit back and enjoy, relax the talk. We'll be just cruising through the diversity and through the mountain passes of the Eastern Himalayas. So the region in the focus, the Eastern Himalayan region is a very large chunk of area or a landscape which starts from Nepal, which includes Bhutan, Northeast India, and also portions of China and Myanmar. So it's a huge landmass. It's a huge landscape, having an immense amount of size of the landscape. It has a lot of diversity of landscape habitat types again within. So one can expect enormous amount of diversity also. But the focus, the today's talk will be of Northeast India, which is also called as the Indian Eastern Himalaya. So Northeast India is also called as the NER, or it's called as Northeastern region of India, and is the easternmost part of the country, representing the geographical boundaries with China, Nepal, Bhutan, and Myanmar, as well as Bangladesh. So it's a kind of a region having an enormous amount of diversity, as well as cultural connections with several portions of these countries, like with Nepal, like with Bhutan, with China, with Myanmar, and Bangladesh. So it comprises of all the 8 states, starting from Sikkim to Arunachal, Assam, Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura, and Meghalaya, along with Assam. So usually they are called as, certain people do not include Sikkim, so they call them as 7 sisters of Northeast. But including Sikkim, there are around 8 states in Northeast India. The Siliguri corridor, or this chicken neck, which is usually considered connects the Indian Eastern Himalayan region to the main part of the country. It's a very small, narrow stretch of 21 to 40 kilometers. The region shares an international boundary of 5,182 kilometers with several neighboring countries, as I have mentioned, with China, Bhutan, Nepal, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. And it is usually termed as Indian Eastern Himalayas. When it comes to the classification of Indian Eastern Himalaya, it actually varies from different sources. But if I go by the National Mission on Himalayan Studies of Ministry of Environment and Forest Climate Change, Government of India, so I'll be considering Arunachal Pradesh of India, as well as certain districts of Assam, even, which usually fall under this. It is a very interesting region with a lot of diversity with the people, even, or with the cultures even. So we have around 135 tribes which are actually represented from this region out of 450 tribes which are present in the country. So it's enormously rich when it comes to the cultural diversity also. So usually when researchers from the biodiversity background or from the ecological sciences tend to work in, we might be kind of avoiding, or we might not be concentrating much on the cultural diversity, but cultural diversity is also something very important which we people have to start looking at and connecting it to the biodiversity. So something we should be looking is also the biocultural diversity of the region. It's very interesting to see earlier the maps of this region, especially states like Arunachal Pradesh, were represented this way on an historical overview. So this was taken from Vivier Elvin's book of Philosophy of NIFA, which is called as Northeastern Frontier of Assam. Prior to 1950s, it was 1960s. It used to be represented as NIFA, but now we have all these 8 different states which are present in that. And it's very interesting to see on how the state of Arunachal Pradesh is being represented with the help of different tribes and different regions present here. So we have the Apatanis being represented here. We have this Mompas, which are usually represented towards the western. We have the Mishmis represented here. So it's kind of very rich when it comes to the cultural diversity, when we speak about the tribal regions in this region. So, but now it's the complete shape has changed, meaning the geographical boundaries or the legal boundaries of the districts have changed. But earlier it used to be simple and very well represented. So from here on in the presentation, I'll be referring Northeast India as Indian Eastern Himalaya also. So please don't get confused with the terminology, because Northeast India is also called as the Indian Eastern Himalayan region. So why is it important in context of biodiversity? So as we keep saying that it's a biodiversity rich region, as we keep saying that it's a hotspot. So the entire Eastern Himalayan region falls under the ecoregions as described by WWF of the globe. It has immense amount of diversity. Along with that, it is also the hotspot, which is the part of Indo-Burman hotspot region, and is also called as the endemic bird area. We have the important bird areas as well as the IUCN Center for Endemism. So this whole portion of Indo-Burman region, where you have this portion of Northeast India, Indian Eastern Himalaya being represented, is a part of it. So it's a region much important. It has got high diversity of high biodiversity. The regions lowland and the mountain moist to wet tropical evergreen forests are considered to be the northernmost limit of the 2 tropical rainforests in the world. Even if you go to a place like Namdapha National Park, which is a part of the Arunachal Pradesh bordering Burma, you tend to see the Dipterocarpus, northernmost distribution of the Dipterocarpus forests are found till there. So here is one endemic bird, Bugan leochila, which was discovered somewhere around 2002 to 2005 by Dr. Ramana Atreya. So this is one of the recently discovered bird from this region, which is very much endemic to one of the places called Eagle Nest Wildlife Sanctuary, which is near to Bhutan in the western portion of Arunachal. So this region has got immense amount of endemism in it. It's an endemic bird area also, and also it is an IUCN Center for Endemism. So this is just an example of how we tend to see or how we tend to have these endemic birds within this region. So another great example is of other giant gliding squirrel, which is called as the Namdapha gliding squirrel or Bisphamayopterus bisfosi. So this is the species which was actually found in Namdapha National Park of Arunachal again, found towards the easternmost part of the country, bordering Myanmar. So this species was discovered in 1981 somewhere, and once after the discovery of that species, it was never seen again. So we have been surveying that areas again and again, but still we are not that successful on encountering this species. But the whole of the boost has come from Laos as well as China, when this species from the same genus have been discovered from Laos as well as China. Like one is Bisphamayopterus gangliensis, which is from China again, and Bisphamayopterus laoensis from Laos again. So now we have started with the hope that again the species can be resumed. So this species is one more endemic which is found in the Eastern Himalayan region, that is in Arunachal Pradesh of India again. So there were several misidentifications, or how there were a lot of critic errors that have crept in the scientific research. People have started People have started portraying red giant gliding squirrel as the Namdahar gliding squirrel, and there were a lot of chaos that was happening on this. And this is one of the publications which one can refer to on differentiating between the red giant flying squirrel as well as the Namdahar flying squirrel. So some of the facts that highlight the biodiversity significance of the region. So around 51 forest types are found in this region, broadly classified into 6 major forest types. So this region has got the elevational level starting from 100 meters to around 8,500 meters. So this is an enormous, there is an enormous variation in the elevational category. When you look at the variation in the elevational category, you can actually, one can expect differences in the forest types here. So you have base level starting from 100 to 1,000, 1,200 meters. You have the tropical forest, after which you tend to see subtropical forest from 1,200 to 1,800, beyond which you tend to see the temperate and alpine forest. At the same time, we also have the wet evergreen forest and the broadleaf forest even in this area. So on a whole, in India, if you look at the floral diversity, so there are around 15,000 species of flowering plants, out of which 8,000 species alone have been represented from the Indian Eastern Himalaya. So one can understand the immense amount of diversity. It's almost more than half of the diversity that is actually found in India, which is just alone, which is actually being represented in a small landmass of Northeast India alone, including 40 of the 54 species of gymnosperms found in India, and around 500 out of 1,012 species of pteridophytes which are found, and around 825 species of orchids. So orchid diversity is enormously high. Very interestingly, we have one protected area in Arunachal Pradesh, which is called as the Sessa Orchid Sanctuary alone, specifically designed to conserve the orchids, because this region, which is bordering towards the Bhutan, has got immense amount of orchid diversity. And there is an orchid research center also in that region. And around 80 of 90 species of rhododendrons. Again, rhododendrons are found enormously abundant, as well as the diversity is so high in this region that if you look at the whole of the Himalayan stretch, even out of the 90 species of rhododendrons, except few of them are found in Western Ghats even in India, 80 species are represented from this region. And 60 of 110 species of the bamboos and 25 of 26 species of the canes are found in this region. Again, these numbers are kind of not static. They are kind of dynamic. The numbers keep changing as the time tends to move on a temporal scale, because we have the diversity that is being added now and then. These species belong to around 200 plant families and 315 recorded in the Northeast India alone. And we have raised families such as Nepanthaceae, which are the parasitic plants again, Liliaceae and Leatheraceae, which are unique in the world, which are represented from this portion as well as from the Southeast Asian region. If you look at a comparison between the two biodiversity hotspots that are present in India, that is the Himalayas, as the Eastern Himalayas, as well as the Western Ghats, I'll just show you a comparison on how rich the Eastern Himalayan region is in comparison to the Western Ghats. I hope most of you could understand the Western Ghats region, but Western Ghats are usually found along the west coast of the southern portion of the country, starting from Kerala to Maharashtra. So it's a hill chain that is actually seen in that region. If you look at the comparison also, Northeast India, the Indian Eastern Himalayan is much larger in area, that is around 2,60,000 square kilometers, whereas Western Ghats is around 1,60,000 square kilometers. But if you look at the diversity, 7,000 angiosperms are found here. So don't worry about the numbers from the previous slide, because these are different sources altogether. And you can see 1,500 species in Western Ghats. So one can see a sharp contrast between the Western Ghats as well as the Northeastern India, the Indian Eastern Himalayas, where the diversity is so high. And even if you look at the mammals, around 73 species of mammals are present in Northeast India, 14 in Western Ghats, reptiles around 201. Again, all these numbers are kind of static, or kind of not static. They are kind of dynamic on a spatial scale. These are old numbers from 2000, from the year 2000. And we have the enormous amount of bird diversity, especially when it comes to the endemism. Around 140 endemic birds are found in this region, whereas the Western Ghats has got less number of birds which are endemic in the region. So this is a profile on looking at the endemism in case of the two hotspots, that is in Western Ghats as well as in Northeast India. So when we spoke about the point on how this region is rich when it comes to endemism, this table shows on the comparative analysis of two different hotspots which are present in India itself and how the endemism tends to vary between these two regions. And clearly, Northeast India or the Indian Eastern Himalaya is a clear-cut winner when it comes to the endemism as well as the diversity of that region in comparison to the Western Ghats, which is found in the southern portion of the country. So according to the Indian Red Data Book published by BSI, or the Botanical Survey of India, 10% of the total flowering plants in the country are endangered. Of the 1,500 endangered floral species, 800 are found in Northeast India alone. And around 350 species of ethnobotanically useful plants are reported from Northeast India. And out of this, nearly 120 to 150 species are highly threatened. So this whole region tends to have immense amount of anthropogenic pressure even, and that's the reason why one can see that many of the floral species or many of the flora tend to usually fall under the threatened category. I'll be speaking about the anthropogenic pressure in the next coming slides. I'll not put more emphasis on that over here itself. High biological diversity is often recorded related to the forest cover of the region. So the first question that usually which comes to our mind is like, why so much of diversity in this region, right? So the reason is, like as I was mentioning in the earlier slides, there is an enormous amount of variation in the elevation. So it starts from 100 meters and it ends up to 8,500 meters in case of Sikkim. So one can see enormous amount of diversity. And at the same time, as this is present in the easternmost portion, the monsoon tends to occur between the months of March to October with spells here and there. And that's the reason why this region tends to experience enormous amount of rainfall. Rainfall coupled with elevation as well as the soil types tends to make this area much richer, and that's the reason why we tend to have high amount of diversity in this region. As I was mentioning, this area is again land of discoveries. From past 2 decades, we have been seeing a lot of new birds as well as the mammals being discovered from this region. A lot of range extensions or new species extension records have been recorded from this region, like that of Chinese coral and leaf deer, which were earlier not recorded. So one can see that these areas are kind of very remote, not well explored, and there is not much work on inventarization of these regions. Currently, there is a lot of funding that is being given to the Himalayan region by the government of India, and that's where we tend to see a lot of new range extensions or new discoveries that are coming from this part of the country. But we also have the UNESCO sites in this region, like that of Manas National Park or Kaziranga National Park, which is home to one-horned rhino, which is found in Nepal again, even in portions of the foothills. So this is one of the glamorous, charismatic species one we have in the grasslands of India. Some of the locations in the region continue to remain inventorized, so there is a lot of inventarization work that is happening. And specifically, there is one protected area called as the Mauling National Park in Arunachal. Still lacks a lot of, approaching the national park itself is difficult. So many of the protected designated areas in this region tend to be remote. So one has to reach one has to reach on foot to reach these protected areas even. So one can understand how remote these places are. So we never know how many species are yet to be discovered from this part of the country. So another such threatened species is white-bellied heron, Ardea insines, which is actually found in Bhutan as well as in Eastern Himalayas of India, that is in Arunachal. So this was one of the records that we got from Namdapha National Park, which is again found in bordering the Myanmar. So this species is kind of very critically endangered. Hardly around 70 to 80 individuals are present on globe as of now, and we have around some 10 to 15 individuals hardly in Arunachal alone, and most of the population tends to happen in Bhutan rather than India. So this is one of the threatened species again found in this region. So some of the mesmerizing biological landscapes of Arunachal, just having a view on how these landscapes tend to vary based on different elevations. So this is 2 protected areas of Kamlang Wildlife Sanctuary, which is towards the easternmost Arunachal, and Eagle Nest Wildlife Sanctuary, which is westernmost Arunachal. These are certain pictures again from the eastern Arunachal landscape, which is representing the Indo-Burman region, that is the portion of Arunachal bordering Burma. These are all the lowland tropical forests, which are up to elevation of 400 meters hardly, and they are immensely thick and immensely densely populated with the trees around this area. And slightly moving towards the higher elevations in the eastern portion of the Indian Eastern Himalaya, one can see the snow-capped peaks again in the top. And when you come to the central portion of Arunachal, which is the Indo-Chinese portion, one can see the variation in the forest type again, mostly represented by bamboos as well as other other conifers. And when you look at the Western Arunachal landscape, which is of Indo-Chinese and Indo-Tibetan actual part, so this is the region where we have this Sessa sanctuary, which is actually, this is near to the Sessa sanctuary only, the picture that was taken. And we have immense amount of diversity in Western Arunachal landscape, especially of birds. So places like Eagle Nest Bird Sanctuary alone has got 400 plus species of birds which are recorded as of now in a small protected area in Western Arunachal. So if you go to the slightly higher elevations towards the Western Arunachal, you can see the sharp contrast in the left side. This image is from Tawang district in Arunachal, which is bordering Bhutan. So one can see the snow-capped peaks in the background along with the pine forest in the bottom. So it's more or less similar to Nepal. I think most of you would have seen similar landscapes in Nepal even. This is one more from the eastern landscape. Again from the eastern landscape. Again from the western landscape. And we also have a very unique landscape like that of Pundis, or the floating islands of grasslands, which are found in Manipur region of Northeast India, which hosts one of the most threatened species of deer, that is the Shanghai deer in this portion. And these Pundis are the floating islands. These are the home for this threatened species. And there is again an enormous amount of pressure on the Pundis. There is impact of climate change again, which I'll not be speaking or emphasizing much here. But these are again unique landscapes which are actually found in case of the Indian Eastern Himalayas. These are all at low elevations, not at the higher elevations. So as I was mentioning, this land is also rich when it comes to the indigenous people, when it comes to the tribals in that region, in this region, who hold enormous amount of traditional and ecological knowledge. So these tribes tend to live in harmony with wildlife most of the time, and they tend to have a lot of indigenous techniques as well as traditional knowledge, which is actually important to document. And they also have been living in harmony with nature since ages. And this is one of the pictures that I have taken from Western Arunachal, from bordering Bhutan again. If you look at the whole of the tribal diversity just in a state like Arunachal, there are around 40 major tribes and 110 subtribes. So each of the valley has got different tribes, and they have different dialects and languages again. So it's unique, and it's very diverse when it comes to the cultural diversity also, when it comes to the tribal diversity also. And everywhere when you actually go, the system of the taboos, the system of the taboo system tends to vary from area to area, and it's very interesting to study all these aspects, even which I'll be showing certain examples down below this slide. So that's not the end. This region is land of discoveries, as I was mentioning again. Arunachal macaque, which was discovered somewhere in the beginning of 2000 year, again found in the Western Arunachal, bordering Bhutan. So this is portion of Tawang. So this primate was discovered somewhere in the 2000s year. Earlier, people knew that there was a macaque, but most of them were usually confusing it to Assamese macaque, but it's not an Assamese macaque. It's an Arunachal macaque altogether, which is Macaca munzala, newly discovered species from the Western Arunachal landscape. A lot of new species have been emerging out. So people have started exploring the diversity of the reptiles even, and they have come out with new species of non-venomous burrowing snake, which is called as Trachysinum apatai. Apatai is the tribe in the central Arunachal called the Apatani tribe. So the snake was named on the name of the specific tribe. And in the same protected area of Thale Wildlife Sanctuary in the central Arunachal, they have newly discovered a species of Aganid moth even. And there are a lot of range extensions, new species which are actually found in adjacent countries have been found in this region also, adding to the diversity of the Eastern Himalayan region. So again, these are all very recent, why in the last 1 decade, all these have been happening. And richness of the avifaunal species used in the hotspot categorization and endemism, you can see out of 1,170 species of birds which are present, 140 are the endemics. In mammals, even out of 329, 73 are endemics in this region. And out of 484, again 201 are the endemics of reptiles and amphibians. So there is a lot of endemism. So 25% of the species of birds, mammals, and reptiles which are usually found in this region are kind of endemics alone. So the endemic diversity is quite high, and that's the reason we actually mentioned the name of mention a sentence in the beginning saying that this region is enormously important when it comes to the endemism. Why so much of diversity? So I have spoken earlier, but here are the main regions: the diverse climatic conditions, topography and elevation, the edaphic factors, sandy zone, that is the connection and the gateway to the Southeast Asia, and variety of habitats are the forest types. So as you tend to move, as we all know, as we tend to move from the lower elevations to the higher elevations, we usually tend to see the change in the temperature or drop in the temperature. As I was mentioning, this area has got regions starting from 100 meters to 8,500 meters. One can expect the change in the temperature as you move up in the elevation. At the same time, the topography is one more factor, which is actually a reason for having high diversity in this region, along with the edaphic factors. If you look at the Western Himalayan, which is present in India, rather than the Indian Western Himalaya, you tend to see more diversity in the Indian Eastern Himalaya, because this Indian Eastern Himalaya is much younger when it comes to the age, even when compared to the Western Himalaya. And at the same time, the soil is kind of more nutritious and it's called kind of more rocky in this region. And secondly, if you look at the connection, so this is Namdapha National Park that I was trying to mention, which is in the easternmost part of Arunachal of India. And you can see this finger-like projection here. This is all Myanmar. So here is the Namdapha National Park. This national park is usually considered as the gateway for the entry of the flora and fauna from Southeast Asia into India. And that's the reason why you tend to see high diversity of floral as well as the faunal components being concentrated in this region alone of Kamalang Wildlife Sanctuary as well as Namdapha National Park. I'll be giving a short example later on in the next slides on how this region tends to hold high diversity just when it comes to the diversity of gliding squirrels alone. And so one can see the changes in the elevation. So we also have grasslands, especially in the foothills, in case of Assam, which are home to one-horned rhino again. So a few observations from Arunachal Pradesh alone, because I have been working in Arunachal Pradesh, which is part of the Indian Eastern Himalayas. So I'll be speaking about the flying squirrels, which are again rodents and the small mammals, and it could be of interest for the people from FMCRF also. Okay, the squirrels are trying to warn me. I shouldn't call them as flying squirrels. They should be called as the gliding squirrels because they glide and they never fly. So the terminology has been wrongly used since the beginning. They do not flap their patagium. They usually tend to stretch the patagium and use the aerodynamics, and they tend to glide from one tree to another tree, and they are not flying. So I request the viewers also to keep a caution and start using the word gliding squirrel rather than flying squirrels in the future. So we use a simple spotlighting technique. I think most of you should be familiar on spotlighting technique, where we tend to use the red colored LED lights in order to check for the presence of the nocturnal mammals. And here is one example. So if you tend to move in the forest with the red colored LED lamps in the night, one can see reflections because of that, because produced by the eyes of the nocturnal animals. It's usually a common sight in case of other livestock like cow or other feral animals like stray dogs and all. So this is usually a common phenomenon. So you can see such reflections, and you can use a larger flashlight in order to check for the diversity, to check for which animal is usually found in that area. So spotlighting is a cheap, non-expensive method and also a non-invasive method to document some of the nocturnal mammals, which are nocturnal birds, which are usually found in these forest types. So it's very interesting to see. If you look at the Southeast Asian region alone, so if you look at the Southeast Asian region, or if you look at the hotspot of the gliding squirrels, especially. Southeast Asia is considered as the hotspot for gliding squirrels. There are around 60 species of 40 to 50 species of gliding squirrels are found in this region. Again, these numbers tend to keep on changing. There is a lot of taxonomic conflict that is happening. So I do not really stick to the numbers of what I'm trying to say. There is a lot of variation from different publications. But you can see this region alone has got, the state of Arunachal Pradesh alone has got around 14 species of gliding squirrels. So if we, on the whole, if you tend to consider, this state alone can be rich. This state alone can be very rich when it comes to the gliding squirrel diversity. So it can, this state alone can hold a competition, or it can actually give a tug of war for the countries like Malaysia as well as Indonesia, which usually are considered to be rich when it comes to the gliding squirrels alone. So 14 species out of most of the species are usually threatened in this region because of the hunting that usually tend to happen. And there is a lot of diversity that tends to happen when you move from the lower elevations to the higher elevations alone. So these are all the Bisonopterus as well as the Pterostrata species are usually the larger species, which are usually larger in size. And the smaller species are usually the Bellomies as well as the Hylopides, which are usually the smaller species of the flying squirrels, the gliding squirrels. This is the overall diversity map of the species, and you can see when it comes to Arunachal Pradesh state alone, the highest diversity of gliding squirrels are found in the region of easternmost portion of the Arunachal. This is the Namdapha National Park that I was trying to mention. So you can see what is the diversity. So there are around around 6 to 7 species of the species are found in this region alone, and you can see less diversity is actually found in the westernmost portion of the landscape, which is moving towards the Bhutan region. And this alone is also one of the reasons why we tend to consider Namdapha National Park to be the gateway or the entry of Southeast Asian species into the Asian or the Indian region. So this is the portion, and you can see the highest concentration of gliding squirrel diversity alone in the eastern Arunachal Pradesh of the Indian Eastern Himalaya. So anyone interested can actually go through these papers on the diversity, distribution, the status of gliding squirrels in Eastern Himalaya, and there are new records and occurrence of the species from this region also. So here are certain pictures. On the left, you can see this is Pterostrata magnificus. This is Pterostrata caniceps, or the gray-haired gliding squirrel, usually inhabiting the rhododendron forests of elevation about 1800 meters to 2500 to 2600 meters, found in mostly in the rhododendron forest. And this is, I think, the second picture in the world to be taken from this region. Earlier, there were no much records of this species, and earlier it used to be considered as the subspecies of spotted jane gliding squirrel. And now we are having a word like we are having a word with IUCN to consider this as a new species, separate species altogether. This is Hylopides albanizer, or the particolored gliding squirrel. Again, there's a lot of differences in the color morph as well as subspecies, but this is the one which is usually found in the easternmost portion of Arunachal. Again, this is the red jane gliding squirrel, the most commonly found gliding squirrel in the Southeast Asian region as well as the easternmost portion of Arunachal also. This is the largest species again. This is the Bhutan jane gliding squirrel, which is found towards the western as well as the central Indian land, the central Arunachal landscape. This is Pterostrata elegans, or the spotted jane gliding squirrel. This is the specimen which was actually taken from Laos. I didn't have the picture. So this is the spotted jane gliding squirrel, again found towards the easternmost portion of eastern Arunachal. So again, getting back to the carnivore diversity, especially the small carnivores and the lorises. So I'll be speaking mostly about the civets as well as the mongoose and about the martens, which are usually found in this region. A total of 13 species of small carnivores occur in this just 3 protected areas, which are found in the easternmost portion of Arunachal alone of Meha Wildlife Sanctuary. I'll just show you in the map. I'm just speaking about this region of a portion, a very minor, small portion within Indian Eastern Himalaya. So we can see enormous amount of diversity of the small carnivores. So we have species like the binturongs, which are usually considered as the bear cats. We also have new records of the small tooth palm civet. Earlier, there were no much records of the small tooth palm civet from this region, but we have photographic evidences, and IUCN has actually extended the range distribution of the species through the new records that we actually got. The most common species which are usually found are the masked palm civet, the common palm civet, the large Indian civet, and the small Indian civet. And interestingly, we have one of the most elusive small carnivore, which is the spotted linsang, which is found in this region. We also have different mongoose, like rabbiting mongoose and the stripe-throated mongoose. And we have the badgers, like the small tooth ferret badger as well as the large tooth ferret badger. And the weasel, which is usually found with the slightly lower elevations in the easternmost portion of the Indian Eastern Himalaya. So in reality, out of the 33 species of small carnivores found in India, 20 species occur in Namdapha National Park alone. In the easternmost portion of the Arunachal. Okay. So these are certain publications. If someone is interested, people can actually go through them, where we spoke about the first further observations of the small tooth palm civet from Namdapha National Park in Arunachal, to improvise the maps of IUCN for the species distribution. And this was very interesting when it comes to the binturongs diversity. So binturongs are usually found in numbers of 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 hardly in a group. But this was very interesting when we saw a small group of 5 to 6 binturongs were there in a single tree of Ficus drupaceae where it was feeding. A total of 4 adults as well as 2 juveniles were actually found. And it was one of the most interesting observations to be seen, where five binturongs, confirmed 5, and I am doubtful about the 6th one, but confirmed 5 group was actually found in this region. So binturong is again a near threatened species of small carnivore, which is found throughout the state of Arunachal as well as other portions of Northeast India. Again, which is considered as a bear cat. So here is one more publication. If someone is interested, people can actually go through the referred report that we have submitted on that. It's nocturnal frugivores and the small carnivores which are usually found in this region. So here are certain pictures of the small carnivores which you can see. This small Indian civet, we have binturong, we have the common palm civet, the Himalayan palm civet. Sorry for the bad picture quality because most of these pictures were taken in the night with low resolution cameras. And here is a spotted linsang, which is a very elusive species, very hard to sight in the forest. And this was taken from a camera trap from Namdapha National Park. So a very interesting nocturnal primate. SLolaris is found throughout in most portions of Northeast India or the Indian Eastern Himalaya. A very elusive species. There was a lot of the species was usually considered as data deficient species earlier, but status has changed now because of the increased amount of research that is being happening on the SLolaris. Very interesting species to study. Still, in this portion of the country, very little information is available except for some distributional records and maybe certain papers on the habitat. But this could be one very interesting species which one can study. And on the right, we have the red panda, which is again subdivided into subspecies in the recent publications which has come up in the PLOS of the species occurring towards the China side on the Indian side. So this was from the Western Arunachal, this is a rescued red panda, which was actually hit by a vehicle and it was being treated. So when we were speaking about the rhododendrons, so I think many of you would be very interesting and many of you would be familiar with the rhododendron diversity even. As I was mentioning, highest diversity of the rhododendrons is found in the Eastern Himalayas alone, which has got, and most of the rhododendron concentration is found in the westernmost portion of Arunachal bordering Bhutan, where you tend to see good diversity of rhododendrons. You can follow through one of the publications which has come out from my previous institute, where they were extensively working on the red pandas. So even if, rhododendrons. If you look at the rhododendron diversity on a whole, at the global scale even, its red portion tends to indicate the high diversity of the rhododendrons. And you can see that Indian Eastern Himalaya is also a portion of the region which usually falls in the high diverse rhododendron regions of the world. And you can see very less or little diversity or redundancy is found in the Western Ghats. So this portion is of the Western Ghats. And you can see that we have less diversity of redundancy found in the Western Ghats, but abundance or the high diversity of redundancy is found in the Eastern Himalayan region. Where there is high diversity, it means that people dependency on the resources is high, which is actually a common understanding, and that's one can expect huge threats to that biodiversity in this region. Like the initial thing is the habitat loss, because if you look at the region of Northeast India, there is an extensive amount of shifting cultivation that is actually seen. As I keep telling to my students, even if you look at the rainforests usually are not, the soils of the rainforests are usually not that rich when it comes to the nutrients or the nutrient cycle. But when the soil tend to be more productive because of the active cycling of the nutrients which tend to happen in that region because of the high amount of litter concentration, as well as the dynamics of the nutrient cycles which we tend to see in that region. But when the forests are cleared, the forest lands tend to be nutrient rich for only certain period of time, maybe some 3-4 years, and that is when agriculture is being done. And again, those areas are kind of abundant, and then they tend to move to a new area where the forests are being cut. So habitat loss because of shifting cultivation could be one of the biggest troubles in this region. Second, we have extensive amount of areas being converted into agricultural lands, especially the foothills or the foothill regions, because this region has a lot of fruit plants even, which are actually grown, like the rough kiwi, as well as pears, which come from that region, and oranges, and a lot of different vegetable crops are also grown, like the rough ginger and in mustards, which are extensively grown in this area. So that is one more reason why we tend to see a lot of habitat loss being happening in this region. Habitat degradation, because earlier, maybe some 30-40 years back, when the population was less, and the shifting cultivation had large fallow periods, meaning the same area again being used for agriculture used to be some 60-70 years by the time the forest would have regenerated and it have been turned into a mature forest. But now that cycles of fallow period have been reduced to maybe hardly 1 or 2 decades, and that's the reason why the degradation of the habitat is also occurring. Because as we all know, different stages of the forest, the different age group of the forest tend to hold difference in the diversity of flora as well as the fauna. Hunting, as we all know, hunting is a major issue throughout the globe for the decline in the species, and this area is not an exception. Though the tribes tend to live in harmony with the nature, hunting for bushmeat and hunting for poaching for trade and all is one of the biggest threats in this region, where a lot of species are being lost in this region. Hunting tends to be very common in this region. Though we have stringent laws in the country, but still hunting tends to get unnoticed in most of the times. Illegal trade and collection, poaching, as one of my friends from Nepal, he was working on the caterpillar fungus, and similarly we tend to see Paris polyphylla as well as the caterpillar fungus collection, which is usually called as the kidajadi in the local language. So these species are usually collected and extracted more from the natural reserves, and that's the reason why there is a lot of decline in the highly economically important medicinal plant diversity also in this region. So the extraction rates are much higher because of their high value in the international market, which could be up to several $1,000 for a little portion of the region. Second, we also have a big problem of gallbladder extraction of bears, and because each thola, or the 10 grams of gallbladder of bears, could be of several hundreds of US dollars even. So again, hunting or poaching of the species of especially the bears is also kind of quite common. And several species like that of the glamorous species like red pandas are also hunted for their fur and coat. But now it's very interesting to see that people are trying to change in this region. Apart, you tend to see this region is kind of not very static. It's kind of dynamic, and there is a lot of change that is happening at the landscape level even, and that's where the natural disasters and the man-made disasters tend to play a major role, which could be responsible for the habitat loss. Even extensive amount of rainfall, regulated tourism, as well as other developmental activities like the linear infrastructure which are coming up in this region are adding more pressure on this region. And that's the reason why we tend to see the man-made disasters. So usually people do not write about the man-made disasters when it comes to the loss of the biodiversity of a specific region, but I specifically wanted to mention this because man-made disasters, especially like the forest fires, as well as linear infrastructure, are trying to be the future threats of this region. And then you have the cultural medicinal use. As I was mentioning, this region is rich when it comes to the cultural diversity, or is usually rich when it comes to the tribal diversity, and that's the reason why you tend to see most of the species being extracted from the local forest and are being used by the communities itself for their use. And you can see there is a lot of change in the forest types even which is occurring. There is a problem when it comes to reporting the exact numbers, especially looking at the satellite imagery, because most of the areas tend to turn green during the rainy season, and one cannot exactly categorize if this is a disturbed forest or an undisturbed forest. But that's not an end, because we have been speaking about the enormous amount of threats the species that the species tend to face in this landscape. There is a lot of hope that is still left. And if you look at one of the examples, which here, this is Punkti village, which is present in Nagaland, bordering Myanmar, where millions of these birds, Amur falcons, usually tend to fly to this region because the Amur falcons tend to migrate from the south of Africa with a stopover in India in Nagaland, and then they tend to move to the easternmost portion of China. So during this stay, there used to be an enormous amount of hunting that used to happen in this region. But with the help of the local NGOs, with the help of the local people, the thing has been reversed in the last 6 to 7 years. Not even a single Amur falcon is being killed in this region. People have come out with innovative methods. Now they have named this region as the Amur falcon capital of the world, the Punkti village of this region. There is a huge reservoir there, which was built, and if you go during these months of I think June, you tend to see enormous numbers, or the extensive numbers of this Amur falcon. So you can see if there is a electricity pole or a wire, the complete electricity pole or the wire is covered by Amur falcons. If you have a tree, if you just see in that during that time, the whole of the tree, you will not see the canopy, but it's only the Amur falcons which are actually found. So there is a lot of hope that is happening. The indigenous communities are realizing the importance of biodiversity. Even in fact, the scientists are also learning from them about traditional and ecological knowledge as well as about species, because these are the people who actually teach the scientists about the diversity also. And there is a lot of hope that is actually ahead, even where the local communities are coming for conserving the biodiversity. And at the same time, we have one more case study from Arunachal Pradesh, especially, where they spoke about Eagle Nest Wildlife Sanctuary. So Eagle Nest Wildlife Sanctuary is a sanctuary which is bordering towards the Bhutan in the western portion of Arunachal. And it has got 400 plus species of birds in it. There, the Bougainvillea was discovered. So Bougainvillea is an endemic bird. And there is a very small portion in the Eagle Nest Wildlife Sanctuary where you can see the presence of this bird. So it was very interesting to name the bird with the help of the tribe. So this is the Bugan tribe, which is actually the major tribe in that region. And when the tribe name was associated with the species, the people started believing in the species, and the people started conserving the species. And the whole of the area, which was earlier well known for hunting, has turned into a conservation reserve. Yes, hunting does happen a bit and nowadays, but hunting has reduced because of the local people being involved into the conservation initiatives. So if you go to Eagle Nest Wildlife Sanctuary, most of the people, most of the guides are local. They usually take care of this home-based homestays. They have started developing the homestays even, and the local people usually are trained for bird identification. They usually take the tourists who usually come from different parts of the world for just looking at the birds in this region. I don't know if you people are familiar with the Big Ear movie from the Hollywood. So many landscapes in Northeast India are similar to the sites of attraction where one can see and experience the bird diversity. So another non-human primate, the Eastern Hula gibbon, which is actually again a big taxonomy conflict. I would not speak about the subspecies and species. I'll just put it as Hula gibbon. So Hula gibbon is again found in this region, the only ape. This species has been protected by one of the tribes called the Mishmis. And on the top, you can see one of the books, which is written by one of my friends, Dr. Ambika. So she has extensively worked on the the Mishmi tribe in Arunachal alone. So this tribe is very unique. The Mishmi tribe tends to have an integral connection with the nature, and they tend to usually think that gibbons are kind of forefathers and they should be kind of not killed and they should be conserved. They have certain taboo systems which are kind of very strict, and that's the reason why we tend to see the enormous amount of diversity, especially in the Mishmi Hills of Arunachal Pradesh, where the diversity is still persistent and there's a lot of wildlife being visible. So this, and they usually tend to consider the tigers as the elder brothers of the family. Yeah. So Tigers Are Our Brothers is one of the books which was written by one of my friends. So if anyone is interested, they can actually go through this book on how the tribes tend to integrate themselves with certain animals and how the animals tend to be the representatives of their culture. And this region of Mishmi Hills is so rich that you have certain species of gliding squirrels which are recorded from very recently from this region, which are discovered from this region again. And they have very good connection with the nature. So, these are certain people whom I would like to thank at the end of my talk, starting from my institute, the previous institute of Noida in Arunachal, to the forest departments as well as the funding agencies, the important lifelines of the whole work that has been doing with the field assistants. This is some of the field assistants and the cooks who have been working with me since long and who have been accompanying me to some of the remotest and tough terrains, for whom I am very thankful to. So this is the end of my talk. So if you have any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Murali.
Thank you.
That was such a refreshing talk.
Thank you.
So if anyone has any question, please drop them in the chat box and we'll be taking them from there. So we have one question from Fatima Jabin. She says, in the land of discoveries, the Eastern Himalayas, while describing new species, are people describing species using morphological characters more frequently, or some molecular data are being used for new species identification?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. So if you look at most of the time, discoveries are based on the external morphology, but even they are using the currently they are using certain molecular techniques even to describe the new species, like in case of red panda. So the splitting of the red panda happened using the molecular data.
So meanwhile, I also have some questions.
Yes, please.
You said that we should be using the term gliding instead of flying for those squirrels. Yes. So as you are also the member of the IUCN Small Mammal Specialist Group, we see that IUCN also has been using the word flying squirrels. Yes. So are you like taking any steps further to change the term flying to gliding in the near future in the IUCN Red List as well? Yes.
So initially the things comes from a very small work that we tend to do. So several small works tend to combine and then you tend to merge it to make it a big work. So most of the publications which are trying to come out, so I have been using the word gliding squirrel rather than the flying squirrel. So I had several questions which have been asked by some of the people in the top listing even, whether the editors are actually allowing me to use the terminology or not. But in fact, I never faced any position. In fact, I never faced any problem from the reviewers, because the word is really apt. The gliding word is really apt rather than flying. So we have been trying to come out with certain publication, maybe where we have to convince IUCN, because I don't know if you are familiar with the IUCN framework, it takes a lot of time to change the terminology. And moreover, even if you look at the old documents, many of the publications, people have been using the word flying squirrels. So there is a lot. There will be a problem when it comes to the consistency in future when you actually look for the published data or the literature again. So probably they might still be using flying squirrels only, but I hope in near future we'll definitely move ahead and we'll ask the IUCN to change the word or the terminology from flying to gliding. And even IUCN IUCN Small Mammal Specialist Group, many members were actually happy that the word is being replaced by the gliding squirrel.
So, Mr. Kanchan Thapa from WWF Nepal, he says highly enriched content. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
yeah.
I have another question. You talked about the cause of high endemism in northeastern India as compared to the Western Ghats in one of your slides. So, yeah, we know that there are reasons like the topography, climate, and other edaphic factors, and many factors come into play for high diversity or high endemism in any area. So, what kind of climate or what kind of conditions does Western Ghats has?
Okay.
As compared to Northeast India.
So if you look at the elevation is one of the major factors. If you look at the elevation in case of Western Ghats, it doesn't cross beyond maybe 1600 meters. The mountains are not that high. And only few portions that to extreme south of Western Ghats, these portions where you see Tamil Nadu and Kerala are emerging, that is when you have the highest peaks. That is one main reason I feel why we tend to see high amount of diversity in Eastern Himalayas when you compare to the Western Ghats. And moreover, if you look at the landscape level connectivity of Northeast India, the Indian Eastern Himalaya is in continuation with the Southeast Asia. We all know that Southeast Asia has enormous amount of diversity when it comes to the vertebrates and invertebrates. And as I have mentioned in one of the slides, you tend to see the gateway of number of from where the species of Southeast Asia have started entering into India even. And probably that could be one of the reasons why there is an endemism which has evolved in this region of Indian Eastern Himalaya. Whereas in the Western Ghats, there is no much landscape connectivity, except if we consider on a geological scale, probably portions of Sri Lanka are in connection, are in continuity. There was no much connectivity earlier. And that could be the reason why we tend to see less amount of endemism in this region. Elevation is one, and maybe the landscape level connectivity could be the
other. Thank you. So you were also talking about the Shanghai deer on the floating islands in Manipur. So I'm quite interested about that. Can you just explain a little bit more what kind of places what kind of diversity is found there in that place?
So Loktak Lake is found in Manipur, in the state of Manipur of Northeast India, which is again bordering the state to Myanmar. So this has got a huge lake. Even personally, I have never visited Loktak Lake, very interestingly. so this landscape has got kumdis. Kumdis are nothing but the grasses which are usually tend to talk to each other, and they are kind of floating islands. So these islands are kind of very important when it comes to the communities, even because many people actually stay on the kumdis. They have their own huts, and people tend to stay on the huts, and they tend to depend on the fishing as well as other ecosystem services which are usually provided by the wetlands of that region. Shanghai deer is a subspecies of the deer which is actually found in this region, which tends to utilize most of these floating kumdis for the movement as well as for the feeding. And there is again an enormous amount of pressure on the kumdis because of the changing climate. So there should be certain amount of water level that has to be maintained for the kumdi to float. And that is when actually and it's mostly the biomass being stacked over one over the other. It's the old grasses being filled. So it's kind of a floating island of the grasses. And these are the grasses which usually are the reason where you tend to see the grasslands being formed on that, again based on the dead organic matter, and on that you tend to see this Shanghai deer which are actually formed. It's locally called as Tankul even.
Okay, so how large are these islands? How large?
They could be several meters in size. They could be like maybe some 650 meters or 30 meters.
Okay. Yeah. So if anyone has questions, so here we have Mr. Sanjan Thapa. He says, have you found the coexistence of binturong in the habitats of spotted Linsang?
Okay. Hi Sanjan, it's great to see you and good to hear a question from you. So yes, definitely. So So when in the places where we have actually found binturungs, especially in the easternmost portion of the Indian Eastern Himalaya, that is in Namdapha, in the similar landscapes, there were a lot of camera traffic images which are of the spotted Linsang area. Yes, definitely they tend to share similar kind of habitat, except that the observations of mine have been that binturung has been seen uh, in the top canopy mostly, and Linsangs in the bottom canopy in the forest floor. But there are many observations where binturungs do usually come down here, and they tend to use a lot of movement on the ground here. So yes, they do tend to use similar kind of habitat.
So, what kind of relationships have you observed between the humans and wildlife in that place? Because you talked about you gave some examples in your slides, like between the Amur falcon and the local people. Also,
the Mishmis and the gibbons.
That one also. And we have also heard that people from different tribes, they feed on like wildlife, like such as frogs. So what kind of other relationships have you found in Northeast India?
Okay, so usually when it comes to the consumption of the species, so one could be for the use of the medicine as a part of medicine, that is the ethnozoology portion, or ethnobiology, and one is for the cultural connection, and one could be as a use for the as a portion of bushmeat collection. So even in case of the red giant gliding squirrels, which I have been working on, several tribes usually tend to kill that red giant gliding squirrel, and they usually extract the urine of the species. And that the rice is usually stored in this urine of the red giant gliding squirrel, and it is usually consumed in order to treat the kidney stone problem. I really don't know the medicinal region or maybe the chemical composition of the urine, but it has been a usual practice. If I have been asking to several tribes, and several tribes have mentioned the same thing. And at the same time, even the smaller species of gliding squirrels, like that of Hylobates, so the intestine as well as the alimentary canal are usually crushed, and they are usually taken for treating many of the ailments, so especially related to the digestive system. So it's kind of very interesting to see. So this is usually when it comes to the medicinal use context. And I have also observed where the loris hair, the SLolaris hair, is usually used as a kind of source to stop the bleeding. If someone has it on his hand also, usually the hair of the SLolaris are taken and they are usually put over that in order to stop the bleeding. So they think that this hair have certain properties which actually heal the excessive bleeding that is happening in the region. When it comes to the cultural connections, again, several species are used for many of the rituals. Again, when it comes to the squirrels, so we have this orange-bellied squirrel, we have the Malayan giant squirrel, which are found in this region. So these species have a very interesting connection with certain tribes, where these species are given as an exchange during the marriage ritual. So when these species are actually given, it means that the marriage is kind of fixed. So they have these stories where squirrels have convinced a family for the marriage, and that's the reason why people think that when these squirrels were actually given as a part of exchange, the marriage is definite. So the the orange-bellied squirrel as well as the Malayan giant squirrel have immense importance when it comes to the rituals of the marriage. And I don't know, it's a kind of very interesting to see. If you actually go to these portions of Arunachal, they use the portions of the tail of the squirrels as the keychains here, as a source of keychains. This is one, and the cultural connectivity spoke about. And when it comes to the bushmeat collection, so most of these regions, as I was mentioning earlier, are kind of very remote in the region, and the availability of the resources at certain times is very difficult. In fact, in the recent times, like the COVID-19 situations, when the transportation was locked most of the time, and when there is an excessive amount of rain, mostly the regions have a cutoff of transportation even. So it's obvious that these tribes tend to depend on the wildlife as a source of protein even. So bushmeat collection does happen. And also, if you see, many of the skins of the wildlife are used as decoratives and wall hangings in the houses. So this is an old age practice. But now the scenario is very much changing. And I feel it to be more positive, because local communities, they themselves are coming in. They are pushing a lot of conservation initiatives, and they are actually creating small reserves within their villages in order to and they are stopping the hunting, especially during the breeding season also. So they have this very interesting connection during the breeding season. That is, from if you go to state like Nagaland bordering the Myanmar, in certain villages where I have spoke with the hunters, so and the village headsmen, they usually tell that between the month of February till October, the hunting is completely stopped, and the village usually tend to pull all the armory, which is actually the shotguns, slingshots, and they usually put it. Again, during the hunting season after the October, they can actually. Tribes also have certain cultural observations where they do not hunt the species which are usually the pregnant deers, which is actually in the breeding phase, are a pregnant tiger. So they usually tend to avoid the species which are actually uh, carrying, especially during that period. So these are certain observations which I can speak about.
So that means that people there in Northeast India, they are like much more aware of the importance of natural resources, while flora and fauna, and they are much more receptive towards conservation initiatives that we do.
Yes.
So we have another question from Adil. He says, I have even maybe it's a comment. I've even heard tribals in Lower Assam around Manas National Park, they use snout of otters to cure fever. It stems from having beliefs in traditional Chinese medicine. Do you have anything to comment on it?
It might be. I'm not aware about this, but it's thanks for the observation, Adil, that we have gone through.
Okay. So I was just curious.
Mhm.
It seems that you like to spend many nights searching for squirrels at night. So I was just curious that have you ever observed bats during your survey at night? Have you ever happened to observe bats or catch bats at night in the area?
Okay, so I usually tend to. I have observed a lot of bats at times, but my research orientation was mostly towards the gliding squirrels, so I didn't observe more. And moreover, I do not usually catch the animals. I generally use non-invasive techniques for handling the animals or for observing the animals. So I have specifically not looked at catching bats or looking at the diversity of bats. I'm sorry, maybe I'm not the right person to comment more on bats from the region.
Okay, sure. And so how do you like identify the squirrel, the species of gliding squirrels that you are searching?
Okay, so mostly based on the morphometrics only, again based on the color pattern of the coat. In most of the time, because as I have been using non-invasive techniques, it's a very difficult task differentiating the species, especially looking at the coat color and the morphology, external morphology. And as I am more interested on looking at the species, happy not touching them because I want them to be non-stressed during my survey season. It's mostly based on the external morphology.
Okay, so if you have to catch a squirrel somehow, so how do you do that then?
Okay,
In the field?
so for the smaller species, they are usually kind of nest boxes, which are usually used in the Western countries. So when you actually install the nest boxes, the smaller species usually come in and they usually nest. Because if you look at
Okay.
the squirrels, the gliding squirrels, or the normal squirrels, even the tree squirrels, they are kind of cavity nesters. They generally use they are secondary cavity nesters, means they do not make the cavity on their own, but the usual cavities which are usually prepared by the tree cavities, which are usually prepared by uh, or which are usually made by woodpeckers or bobwhits. So the best and the easy way is to use this nest boxes for the smaller species. The larger species, it's a big question actually. The larger species, because they are quite large, even they could extend the tail as well as the whole body could extend up to say 4.5 to 5 feet in length alone, and maybe some 2 feet in width. So they are kind of very huge when they stretch the patagium. I think I have shown in one of the slides where he was holding none of our gliding squirrel. So one way of it could be again monitoring the tree hollows only where they usually tend to nest. It was very interesting to look at one of your publications on the squirrels of Nepal, where they have shown that nesting of red giant gliding squirrel was happening using the tree nest. Means the squirrels are building the nest. What I feel is mostly it might happen when the competition between the species is high in that region, because the Malayan giant squirrel, which is usually found, it tends to make the leaf nest. Similarly, red giant gliding squirrel. But interestingly, I never saw a red giant gliding squirrel making a leaf nest in the forests of Namdapha. It was mostly the tree hollows in which they were nesting. But the publication by SMCRF was quite interesting to see that the gliding squirrels are also making the leaf nest. So in such cases, I don't know how correct will it be to use a shaman trap for the larger gliding squirrels, but I think the sizes have to be slightly modified in order to capture them. But usually one has to keep a very regular check, because it was observed in certain ex-situ conditions where the squirrels were not comfortable living in the hollows even, and they means especially the cages, and they died maybe in next 2-3 days. So it's very even if you tend to use shaman traps, probably they should be very regularly monitored. That could be one, or usually using the nest box, using the tree hollows and studying them could be one. And maybe if you have good amount of funds, arboreal camera trapping could be one more method. I'm yet to use the drone technology for the nocturnal mammals, but in case if I use, maybe I'll be coming out with a new paper, or I'll coming out with a new observation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have a question from Mr. Sanjan Thapa again. He asks, how many subspecies or morphs or variations of Petorista are known in the Eastern Himalayas?
Okay, so we have two two subspecies are the morphs of Petorista in the Eastern Himalayas. I think one is Candidula, Petorista candidula, and one is I'm not getting the subspecies name as of now, but as far as I know, I know about two subspecies which are found in the Himalayas of Petorista. And did you find spiny babbler in your survey?
From Mr. Sagar
No.
Dahan.
Yes, Sagar, no, I haven't.
Okay, so one question from Ishwar Narayana. Dr. Murali, very few people research and little attention on squirrels in India. Why is this? And any plans to take forward to make more research across other states?
Okay. So if you look at means we usually tend to, funding is the main issue for many of the researchers, right? And funding is usually diverted to some of the glamorous species. That's the usual thing. And many of the researchers are kind of, maybe it's my perception, which I have been looking at. It's usually becoming tough for the researchers to spend time in the field. I mean, you don't see many people being interested to spend more amount of time in the field. And moreover, I can very easily say that it's a very neck-paining job to study the arboreal gliding squirrels. So your work starts somewhere in the evening around 4 or 5, when the squirrels tend to start getting active till early morning 4 o'clock. So, and it's very difficult studying them. So funding could be one reason which why people are not getting attracted to study this species. Second, it could be many of the people, in fact, do not know that such species do occur also, because you tend to see very less amount of publications on this in this regarding. And third could be the difficulty surveying the squirrels and identifying the squirrels, because even if you look at the globe on a global scale, you can see only 3 or 4 Westerners who are very well versed, again, even in the taxonomy as well as understanding the diversity of the species. One is like Professor Kaprowski, who is well associated with SMCRF. So Professor Kaprowski is one best known person for squirrels throughout the globe. And we lost one of the great squirrel researcher, Richard Thorington, who was in Smithsonian, I guess. So we have very less people. So even in India, as far as you know, the actively working people on squirrels as of now are around 4 to 6 members hardly. One is Dr. Nandini Rajmani from IISA Tirupati, and I have been looking at Eastern Himalayas. And few researchers are coming up and they are trying to publish, but there is no much data available. So this could be certain reasons. And yes, I have been concentrating mostly on Arunachal alone, but I am trying to expand my research to the other states of Indian Eastern Himalaya, also the other 7 states apart from Arunachal. I have initiated a bit of work in the Western Himalayan region even, where we have looked at the Kashmir gliding squirrel with the photographic reconstruction from Great Himalayan National Park. So we are slowly expanding the work because funding tends to get a bit constrained. We have initiated the work on Namdafa gliding squirrel, the endemic species, but unfortunately because of the COVID, the work is completely under halt. But yes, we are trying to slowly expand, and I had certain talk with Sagar even on having more work on the squirrels between Nepal and India, so that the whole of the Himalayan belt can be well explored. So that's the thing. Yes, Tulsi has mentioned what is the major factors that significantly affected on traditional ecological knowledge on your study sites. Okay, so one problem throughout the globe is the transfer of knowledge from the previous generation to the next generation. This is the biggest problem even in the study area where I have been looking at, because if you look at the current generation, most of the people are trying to move out from those areas, coming to the cities from in the main part of the country and trying to study. So there is a problem of transfer of knowledge from the parental generation to the next generation. So that is one issue which is happening, and that is the same thing which I have observed even in my place. In the study site of mine. So I hope I have answered Tulsi's question. Yes. Yeah. So next question is by Kaustav Nopune. Himalayas are observing rapid change in both biophysical and social systems. Can you share an insight from your long term of engagement in the eastern areas? Okay, so the general observation is that the amount of rainfall that has been occurring in the Eastern Himalaya has decreased over the period of time. Though most of the times you tend to experience the sudden cloud bursts in this region, but on a whole, the amount of rainfall has been decreasing, which has a severe problem. And second thing, the warming. Warming is one more issue which can be seen. So if you speak to certain people in that region, I think this should be the common thing even in Nepal. If you go to the forest guest house in this region, you will not see fans. Right? You will not see a fan or something. But as of now, people have started using fans also, which means that the region has been warming up slowly. So warming up and more amount of rainfall in a very short duration of time, long spells of rainfall being compressed to a short period of time, are some of the things we can have observed in this region.
So he says, can you link it with the impact on
squirrels? Okay,
yes.
So I don't see any sudden change of climate change on the squirrels as of now, because if you look at the tree line shifts that we have, that on a conceptual scale, if you look about the tree line shifts that are being well documented in the European countries, but there is a debate of tree line shifts even happening in the Indian Himalayan region even, and the whole of the Himalayan region even. So maybe the tree line shifts tend to happen, and if the rhododendron species, which are home to certain species like that of red gliding squirrel, may impact the populations of certain species definitely. And certain species are usually found in the high altitudinal rocky regions, like in Jammu and Kashmir portions of EOK also, where they have this woolly gliding squirrel. So these species might face certain issues when it comes to the changing climate or the global warming. But very sharply to speak on, maybe I will not be able to pinpointedly say that global warming or change in the climate would have an impact on the species straight away in the current times.
So I think we have Gerald Felix. He's been raising his hand for a while. So yes. Mr. Gerald, if you have any question, you can ask Dr. Murali in person here. Gerald Felix, you are muted. If you're saying something, you're muted. Do you have any questions? Okay, that might be a mistake then. So if we do not have any questions now, I think we are at the end of the talk for today. So thank you so much, Dr. Murali Krishna. It's been such a pleasure to have you here for our third episode of Wild and Life Seminar series by the Small Mammals Conservation Research Foundation. And so today, I would like to invite Mr. Sagar Dahal from the Small Mammals Conservation Research Foundation for his concluding remarks Mr. Sagar Dahal is the co-founder of SMCRF, and currently he's a PhD scholar at the Florida International University, Miami, USA. And for his PhD, he's working on understanding the spatial ecology of the little-known, globally vulnerable fishing cat, a small cat species present in the Tarai Art landscape of Nepal. So I would like to request Mr. Sagar Dahal for his concluding remarks. Over to you, Mr. Sagar.
Thank you, Versa. Thank you very much, Murali. It's been quite an interesting talk. Thank you so much. You accepted our request and you took this presentation. It was eye-opening for many of us, I guess. I was personally thrilled to know all these new informations from Eastern Himalayas. We have been reading about Eastern Himalayas of Nepal, and also from the literature, it's considered one of the 200 global ecoregions, but the amount of insight that you presented was amazing. So thank you for your elaborated discussion. I came to know that the lots of endemic in this region. It's a gateway to Southeast Asian mammals, and there are lots of biodiversity even compared to Western Ghats. Western Ghats is also considered one of the high biodiversity, but I was not familiar that the differences were so huge, and it was really interesting talk. And also the reason for being so highly diverse, you explained very nicely, and a thorough presentation on squirrels, gliding squirrels of Eastern Himalayas, also other small carnivores and red pandas, and also the threats of wildlife threats in these regions, including wildlife trade and wildlife hunting and poaching, and conflicts with the tribes, and how the success stories have come up during the years from the continuous effort of conservationists in this area. It's been overwhelming. It's been very interesting. And some of the species, I think Sanjan mentioned about binturong. We is very interested in binturong, to find binturong in Nepal, because we still have that in our list of mammals. And so far, nobody has found that species.
Oh.
So he's very interested from many years to find that in Nepal. So that's one of the interesting thing that came up, that we have found spotted Linsang recently. So
wow, that's interesting.
yes,
Very elusive species.
very elusive, and it was also on the list of mammals of Nepal, and nobody has found for many years.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, like few years, it has been few years that it has been found from this Annapurna conservation area,
Okay.
from that portion, from the middle part of Nepal in the Himalayan region. So maybe that's the reason to look look towards binturong in Nepal also, because you mentioned that they share a similar habitat in Eastern Himalayas. So I think that was very interesting insights on binturong. And also you talked about erratic reason factors in topography and elevation, diverse climatic condition, and being sandwiched. That's the reason for its high biodiversity. And also tribal community. Ethnobiological studies have been very strong in this region. Ethnological tradition is very strong in this region. I have also found many peoples from Sikkim and Darjeeling areas where communities have been using ethnic knowledge to generate information on different species of birds and stuff. Even the government are getting help from the ethnic knowledge. And there are lots of tribes here. And also in, I think also in the Nepalese part of Eastern Himalayas, there are lots of tribal community. And I think it's less explored area in Nepal. I think the work only has been concentrated on red panda, few red panda, and also snow leopard. The other species have been overlooked or neglected so far till now. So I think there's lots of opportunities even in the Eastern Himalayas of Nepal. And recently there was a finding of marble cat for the first time in Nepal. In 2018 or 19, the piece was published in Cat News, and it's very much near to Indian border. It's around 4 kilometers far away from the Indian part of the Kanchenjunga Biosphere Reserve. So lots of species that are found in those part can be found also in this part of Nepal,
Yes.
and
Yes.
maybe the distribution range can expand over the years
Yes.
if we continue to look at it. And also, you talk about the gallbladder extraction. That's a very much problem even in Nepal. There are lots of reporting from Nepal that happens to have with the gallbladder extraction. And also the Eastern Himalayas of Nepal, like in Manaslu, in Makaluburun National Park of Nepal, it's connected to the Tibetan region, and it's been considered. There's one small village at the very remote part of that national park, and it's been considered as the hub for the illegal wildlife trade towards China. And many things are collected there, including the poisons from the snakes and scales from the pangolins, and they're exported towards Tibet. And very less has been done to curb that condition, and because it's very remote. And it's also the part of the it's also the problem of Nepal. And you gave a very good story of Amur falcon. I was really excited to hear about that, and also the example that how community tends to conserve species when they are connected with their tribe. I think it's a very good tactic, and I think many upcoming conservationists can look into those ways to conserve their interested species in their working areas. I think it's a very good tactic to involve community for the conservation. And also Barsa mentioned that talked about Sang idea. I was also excited to hear about that, because it was the first time that I hear about it. And SLolaris, there are lots of studies being done in SLolaris also in Bangladesh, and also I think it will also happen in India also.
Yes.
We don't have SLolaris. Maybe we have to explore more on our part of the, maybe that'll be a new species, but there's very little chance. Thank you very much, Dr. Murali. Again, I'm sorry that I mentioned doctor, as you mentioned, not to mention that.
I'll be happy to call you calling me Murali. Come on.
Yeah, thank you, Murali. We have been friends for many years now. It's been, I think we met for the first time in 2011.
Yes.
Yeah, in Kerala, and since then I have been continuously contacting you, and we have been working offline and online. And it was great to meet you this August on India, and now on the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank
we
you.
are
Thank
indebted, Murali.
I'm very much thankful to SMCRF especially, because I keep looking. I even tell many of my students to look at some of the work done by SMCRF. We have been a very active group, especially in Nepal. And I'm very happy to have an organization which is completely working on the small mammals, non-glamorous animals, which usually tend to get less funding. It's very happy. It's very good to see that you people are doing some really good work, and you people can actually be one of the NGOs which can actually portray on how much work can be done on the small mammals alone. Even extensive works on the squirrel, extensive works on the bats that you people have been doing since long. Kind of very interesting. Good luck with your organization, and I'm very happy to see Sanjan after again 10 years, because Sanjan and you were there in 2011. So again, thank you very much for all the members. Thank you, Varsha, for emailing me and providing all the necessary information even. And thanks, Sagar, and thanks, Sanjan, again for providing me with this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Murali, and thank you so much, Mr. Sagar, for your concluding remarks. Today's session was an exciting one. We have so many positive comments here in the chat box, and I think everybody joining the presentation today is thrilled to see you, to hear you. So thank you so much, Dr. Murali. Maybe we'll see you again very soon, sometime in the near future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.